I still remember the exact moment my marriage began to unravel. Not when Sarah left, or when the truth finally surfaced, but on that rainy Tuesday afternoon when Mia sat across from me at the corner cafe, her eyes red-rimmed and desperate, asking me for the one thing I never imagined anyone would. "I need you to get me pregnant, Daniel." The world seemed to tilt beneath me. The clatter of dishes and murmur of conversations faded to white noise as I stared at my wife's best friend of 15 years. The woman who had been our maid of honor, who had held Sarah's hand through her father's funeral, who knew all our secrets. Or so I thought. "What did you just say?" My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. Mia's hands trembled as she reached across the table, not quite touching mine. "I know how this sounds. I wouldn't ask if I weren't desperate." I set my cup down carefully, afraid I might drop it. "Does Sarah know you're here?" "No." Mia's voice dropped to a whisper. "And she can't know." "Not yet." The logical part of my brain was screaming at me to get up and walk away, to call Sarah immediately. But something in Mia's expression held me there, raw desperation mixed with a familiar determination I'd always admired in her. "You've lost your mind," I finally managed. "Maybe." She nodded, a sad smile flickering across her face. "But I'm running out of options, Daniel. The fertility treatments aren't working. The adoption agencies keep rejecting my application because I'm single. The sperm banks." She trailed off, her voice breaking. "I want a child more than anything in this world. Someone who shares my blood, my history." "Why me?" The question felt ridiculous the moment it left my lips. "Because I trust you. Because you're the only man I know who would even consider this. Because," she hesitated, something flashing behind her eyes I couldn't quite read. "Because you understand what it means to want a family more than anything." The words hit me like a physical blow. Sarah and I had been trying for 3 years. 3 years of temperature monitoring, scheduled intimacy, and monthly disappointments. 3 years of watching Sarah's hope dim a little more each time. We'd stopped discussing it 6 months ago, the subject becoming too painful to touch. Sarah would never forgive either of us, I said firmly, though even as I spoke, an unwelcome thought was taking shape in my mind. "I know." Mia's voice was barely audible. "That's why she can never find out." I wish I could say I immediately rejected Mia's proposition, that I went home and told Sarah everything that same night. That would have been the right thing to do. But I didn't. Instead, I told Mia I needed time to think, and I carried her secret home with me like a stone in my chest. For 2 weeks, I lived in a fog of ethical turmoil. I avoided being alone with Sarah, afraid she would somehow read the conflict in my eyes. At work, I stared at spreadsheets without seeing them, my mind constantly returning to Mia's request. What kept me from immediately dismissing it wasn't lust or some midlife crisis. It was the memory of Sarah's face when we'd received our latest negative pregnancy test. The quiet devastation in her eyes when she'd said, "Maybe we're not meant to be parents." I'd held her that night as she finally broke down, sobbing against my chest, and I felt more helpless than I ever had in our 12 years together. We'd discussed alternatives, adoption, surrogacy, but Sarah had withdrawn more each month, as though protecting herself from further disappointment. Mia called me on day 15, just as my resolve to forget the whole thing had solidified. "I'm sorry," she said immediately. "I never should have asked. Let's just forget it happened." The relief I felt was so profound it left me lightheaded. "It's okay. We all get desperate sometimes. I've been approved for another round of IVF," she said, a forced brightness in her voice. "Different clinic, new doctor. They're more optimistic." "That's great, Mia. Really." The conversation should have ended there. Instead, after a pause, she added, "The doctor also suggested I consider surrogacy if this round fails." "Oh." I was thinking of asking Sarah. The words hung in the air between us. "Not now, but maybe in a few months, when she's in a better place." The thought of Sarah carrying Mia's child, a child that wasn't ours, sent an unexpected surge of jealousy through me. "I don't think she's ready for that conversation." "Maybe not," Mia conceded, "but it would mean everything to me to have her involved somehow. You both mean so much to me." After we hung up, I sat in my car for a long time, thinking about family, loyalty, and the many shapes love could take. I thought about Sarah's quiet resignation and Mia's determined hope. I thought about chances and choices and consequences. That night, for the first time in months, Sarah reached for me in the darkness. Afterward, as she slept peacefully beside me, I stared at the ceiling and made my decision. We need rules, I told Mia 3 days later in the sterile anonymity of a hotel bar 2 towns over. In a timeline. And afterward, we never speak of this again. The relief and gratitude in her eyes should have warned me. Nothing this messy could possibly end cleanly. Of course, she agreed quickly. Whatever you say. I thought through the logistics with cold precision. One attempt. If it doesn't work, that's it. We're done. Mia nodded, her fingers nervously turning her water glass. No contact afterward beyond what's normal for our social circle. If you get pregnant, I'm not the father. Not legally, not emotionally, not in any way. I understand. And Sarah can never know. Ever. This was my non-negotiable point, the one thing I couldn't compromise on. Mia reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I would never hurt Sarah like that. You know that. I wished I felt as certain as she sounded. One more thing, I added. I need to know why it has to be this way. Why not a sperm bank? Why not wait for the right relationship? Mia's expression darkened. The sperm banks have waiting lists for my blood type. As for relationships, she looked down. The last 3 men I've dated seriously left when I brought up wanting children right away. I'm 41, Daniel. I don't have time to wait for someone who may never come along. There was more she wasn't telling me, but I didn't press. Perhaps I was afraid of finding a reason to back out, now that I'd committed to this madness. We set a date 2 weeks later, timed to Mia's fertility cycle. As I drove home that night, I felt a strange sense of calm. The decision, once made, seemed to exist in a separate reality from my life with Sarah, as though the man who had agreed to Mia's request was someone else entirely. The night itself was clinical and awkward, nothing like the passionate betrayal scenes in movies. We were 2 people fulfilling a bizarre contract, both pretending we weren't crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. Afterward, Mia cried. Not from emotion, she assured me, but from relief that the hardest part was over. I wasn't sure I believed her, but I needed to. I dressed quickly and left without looking back, driving home with the windows down despite the cold, as though the night air could somehow cleanse me of what I'd done. Sarah was asleep when I got home, her reading glasses still perched on her nose, a book splayed across her chest. I carefully removed both, pulled the blanket up over her shoulders, and kissed her forehead. She stirred slightly, murmuring my name before drifting back to sleep. I stood in the shower until the water ran cold, then sat on the edge of the tub, head in my hands, waiting for the guilt to overwhelm me. Instead, I felt numb, detached, as though I'd watched someone else make these choices. We fell back into our routine over the next few weeks. Sarah seemed happier than she had in months, initiating date nights and long conversations about the future. I threw myself into being the husband she deserved, desperate to compensate for my betrayal. Mia kept her distance, sending the occasional group text or commenting on Sarah's social media posts, but otherwise honoring our agreement. I began to hope that perhaps we could all move past this, that my momentary lapse of judgment would remain buried. Then, on a sunny Saturday morning exactly 3 weeks after the hotel, Sarah's phone chimed while she was in the shower. I glanced at it instinctively, expecting to see a notification from one of her apps. Instead, I saw Mia's name and the beginning of a message. The test is positive. I can't believe. My hands went cold. I picked up the phone, entered Sarah's passcode, her birthday unchanged since we'd met, and opened the message in full. The test is positive. I can't believe it worked. Can you meet me for lunch? I'm freaking out in the best possible way. I scrolled up through their conversation history, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure Sarah would hear it over the shower. Got the fertility clinic results. Not looking good. Doctor says my options are narrowing. Sarah's reply. Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. What about the donor route we talked about? Mia, still on the wait list. Might have another option, though. We'll keep you posted. More exchanges followed, weeks of them. Sarah asking about Mia's plan B, Mia being vague but optimistic. Nothing explicitly mentioning me, but enough to make it clear that Sarah knew Mia was pursuing alternatives. Had Sarah known all along? Had this been some sort of test? The shower shut off. I quickly closed the messages, set the phone down exactly where it had been, and pretended to be engrossed in my own device when Sarah emerged wrapped in a towel. "Any plans today?" she asked casually, toweling her hair. I watched her carefully. "Not really. You? Lunch with Mia. She says she has news." Sarah's face revealed nothing unusual. No suspicion, no hidden agenda. "Good news, I hope." I managed my mouth dry. Sarah smiled. "I think so. She's been so much happier lately. More like her old self." I nodded, afraid to say more. As Sarah dressed, humming to herself, I tried to make sense of what was happening. Did Sarah know about Mia's request? Had she somehow approved it without telling me? The possibility seemed absurd, yet the alternative, that Mia had been confiding in Sarah about her fertility journey while simultaneously planning to sleep with me, seemed equally unthinkable. "Want to come along?" Sarah asked suddenly. Mia wouldn't mind. The question caught me off guard. "To lunch? With you and Mia? Why not? We haven't all hung out in ages." She pulled a sweater over her head, her voice momentarily muffled. Though it might be girl talk, fertility stuff, my heart nearly stopped. I have some work to catch up on, but tell her I said hi." Sarah kissed me on her way out, lingering a moment longer than usual. "You've been so good lately," she murmured against my lips. I couldn't tell if it was an observation or an accusation. The hours while Sarah was gone stretched endlessly. I paced the house, started and abandoned a dozen texts to Mia, and finally sat down to write Sarah a full confession. I deleted it without sending. When Sarah returned, her expression was unreadable. She set her purse down carefully and stood in the kitchen doorway, studying me. "Mia's pregnant," she said finally. I forced myself to meet her eyes. "That's wonderful, right? Isn't that what she wanted?" Sarah nodded slowly. "She's over the moon. Says it was a donor she met through a friend of a friend. Very hush-hush, all legal, but unconventional." I held my breath, waiting for the accusation, the revelation. Instead, Sarah crossed the room and sank onto the couch beside me. "She asked me to be the baby's godmother," she said, her voice catching. "She says she can't imagine anyone better." The irony was almost too much to bear. I put my arm around Sarah, pulling her close, not trusting myself to speak. "You know what's strange?" Sarah continued, resting her head on my shoulder. "I thought I'd be jealous. After everything we've been through, watching Mia get the one thing we've been trying for. But I'm not. I'm just happy for her." I kissed the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. "You're a good friend." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "I've been thinking maybe we should look into adoption again. Or surrogacy." "Really?" I pulled back to see her face. Seeing Mia so happy, taking control of her life instead of waiting for everything to be perfect, it's inspired me. She smiled up at me, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Maybe we've been approaching this all wrong. Maybe family is something you create, not something that happens to you." I felt a surge of hope, followed immediately by crushing guilt. "Whatever you want, Sarah. I'm with you." Later that night, as Sarah slept peacefully beside me, my phone vibrated with a text from Mia. "We need to talk. Tomorrow, usual cafe, 2 p.m. Mia was already waiting when I arrived, a cup of tea cooling untouched before her. She looked different somehow, radiant despite the obvious tension in her shoulders. "You told Sarah it was a donor," I said without preamble, sliding into the seat across from her. I had to tell her something. Mia's voice was defensive. "You weren't exactly forthcoming with a cover story. We agreed Sarah would never know about any of it." My hands clenched involuntarily. "And she doesn't." Mia leaned forward. "She thinks I went through proper channels. That everything is above board. Until when? Until the baby is born and looks exactly like me? Until Sarah starts noticing the timing." Mia shook her head. "No one will make that connection." "Why would they? As far as everyone knows, you and I have never been anything but friends." The confidence in her voice unnerved me. "Then why are we here? What do you want?" Mia took a deep breath. Sarah told me you're considering adoption again. I stared at her, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I think that's wonderful, she continued. You'll both be amazing parents. Thank you, I said cautiously. Is that what you wanted to tell me? No. Mia pushed her tea aside. I wanted to tell you that I'm moving to Boston. I've been offered a position at Massachusetts General. It's a great opportunity, especially now. Relief washed over me, followed by confusion. What about the baby? What about Sarah being godmother? We'll visit. They have these amazing inventions called airplanes. Mia's attempt at humor fell flat. Sarah will always be part of our lives, just from a distance. I should have been grateful. Mia moving away solved so many potential problems. Yet something about the neat resolution felt wrong. There's something you're not telling me, I said finally. Mia looked away, her fingers drumming a nervous pattern on the table. Sarah and I had lunch yesterday. I know. She told me something unexpected. Mia finally met my eyes again. She's pregnant, Daniel. About 6 weeks along. The world seemed to stop. What? How? We haven't been trying. Apparently you have, just not actively tracking it like before. Mia's expression was gentle but firm. She wanted to be sure before telling you. She was going to surprise you this weekend. I felt as though I might be sick. 6 weeks ago would have been right around the time Mia and I, right before Sarah and I had reconnected. Did she tell you that? I managed to ask. Mia nodded. She's thrilled, Daniel. Said it feels like the universe finally aligned. I put my head in my hands, overwhelmed by the implications. My wife was pregnant with my child, while my wife's best friend was also pregnant with my child. It was a nightmare scenario I couldn't possibly have anticipated. What are we going to do? I whispered. Mia reached across the table, her hand covering mine. We're going to do exactly what we planned. I'm moving to Boston. You're going to be a wonderful father to your child with Sarah, and my baby will be raised as mine alone. But they'll be half-siblings, I protested. Born months apart. How can we keep that secret forever? We don't have to keep it forever, Mia said quietly. Just long enough. I didn't ask what she meant by that. I didn't want to know. Mia moved to Boston 3 weeks later. Sarah helped her pack, the two of them laughing and crying as they sorted through 15 years of friendship accumulated in physical objects. I kept my distance, making excuses about work and giving them space for their goodbyes. As weeks turned into months, our lives settled into a new normal. Sarah's pregnancy progressed smoothly, her body changing in ways that filled me with both wonder and dread. We converted the spare room into a nursery, painted the walls a soft green, and assembled furniture that had languished in boxes for years. Mia sent regular updates, sonogram pictures, doctor's appointments, nursery decor choices. Sarah cooed over each one, saving them in a special album she was creating for her godchild. I pretended to share her enthusiasm while privately counting the differences in development between the two babies, my two children who could never know they were connected. The guilt I'd expected to feel for my betrayal transformed into something more complex, a constant, low-grade anxiety about the future we were building on such a precarious foundation of secrets. Then, in Sarah's 7th month, the carefully constructed facade began to crack. It started with a routine doctor's appointment. Sarah came home quietly thoughtful, more subdued than usual. Everything okay? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. She nodded absently. Just some questions about family medical history. Things I never thought to ask my parents about. Like what? Genetic conditions, mostly. Dr. Martin wants a more complete picture. She rubbed her belly unconsciously. Made me realize how little I know about some things. A week later, I came home to find Sarah at the dining table, her laptop open to a genealogy website. What's all this? I asked, setting down my briefcase. Just trying to fill in some blanks. She smiled up at me. Did you know your great-grandmother had twins? It's not in your family medical forms. I hadn't known that. How did you find out? Your aunt mentioned it at Christmas 3 years ago. I found her email about it. Sarah turned back to the screen. Twins can run in families. Might be something we should tell Dr. Martin. That night, I lay awake listening to Sarah's steady breathing, wondering if Mia's baby might be twins, wondering what other genetic surprises might be lurking, waiting to expose the truth. Sarah went into labor 2 weeks early, on a stormy night that seemed appropriately dramatic for the occasion. The birth was uncomplicated, and Oliver James came into the world at 3:17 a.m., screaming his displeasure at being evicted from his comfortable home. As I held my son for the first time, looking down at his scrunched red face and shock of dark hair, the reality of what I'd done hit me with full force. This child, this perfect, innocent being, would grow up with a half-sibling he didn't know existed. A sibling who might someday cross his path, not knowing they shared blood. I made a decision then, cradling Oliver against my chest. Whatever happened, I would protect him. From the truth, from the consequences of my actions, from everything that might hurt him, even if it meant continuing the lie indefinitely. Mia's daughter was born 3 months later. Elena Grace, 7 pounds, 4 ounces. Perfect in every way, according to the text Mia sent Sarah, accompanied by a photo of a tiny face wrapped in a pink blanket. Sarah cooed over the picture, declaring that Elena had Mia's nose, definitely, while I silently searched for any hint of myself in the infant's features. We flew to Boston when Elena was 2 months old, ostensibly for Sarah to fulfill her godmother duties in person. The moment I saw Elena, I knew. She had my mother's eyes, a distinctive gray-blue that Oliver had inherited as well. A genetic calling card that would become more pronounced as she grew. Sarah noticed it too, though she didn't connect the dots. "She looks like Ollie around the eyes," she remarked, glancing between the 2 infants. "Isn't that funny? They could almost be related." Mia and I exchanged a look of pure panic, quickly masked. "All babies look similar," Mia said lightly. "They haven't grown into their features yet." That night, after Sarah had gone to sleep in our hotel room, I slipped out to meet Mia in the hotel lobby. We sat in a quiet corner, both exhausted from the performance we'd been maintaining all day. "This isn't sustainable," I said without preamble. "Sarah's not stupid. Eventually, she'll see it." Mia nodded, her face drawn. "I know. I've been thinking about that. And I'm considering moving further away. Maybe overseas. London, perhaps. Running away won't solve this, Mia." I leaned forward. "The truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how far you go." "Then what do you suggest?" Her voice held an edge of desperation. "Should I just tell Sarah that I tricked her best friend's husband into getting me pregnant? That I've been lying to her face for over a year?" Put that way, there seemed to be no good options. "Maybe." I hesitated, the thought forming as I spoke. "Maybe we need to consider telling her the truth. Together. On our terms." Mia paled. "She'll never forgive us." "Probably not," I admitted. "But at least it would be our choice. Not something forced by circumstance or discovered by accident." We parted without resolving anything, each returning to our separate lives, connected by an invisible thread neither of us had anticipated. Back home, as Oliver grew from newborn to infant to toddler, the weight of my secret became increasingly difficult to bear. Sarah and I settled into parenthood with surprising ease, our marriage stronger than it had been in years. We talked about having another child, about the family we'd always wanted. Mia remained in Boston, sending updates that grew less frequent as Elena developed into a chatty, adventurous little girl. Sarah maintained their friendship through video calls and annual visits, though the distance had inevitably changed the dynamic between them. Then, as Oliver approached his 3rd birthday, the carefully maintained separation of my 2 worlds collapsed. Mia called me at work, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Elena needs a kidney transplant." The words sent ice through my veins. "What happened?" "Rare genetic condition. Bilateral renal dysplasia." Mia's voice broke. "They're testing me, but the doctors say a sibling would be the best match." The implication hung heavy between us. "Mia, I can't." "I'm not asking you to tell Sarah," she interrupted. "But Oliver might be a match. If you could just get him tested quietly." "That's not possible," I said, though my heart ached at the thought of Elena's suffering. "Sarah would have to consent. There would be questions. Then what am I supposed to do?" Mia's voice rose in desperation. "Let my daughter die because we made a mistake?" I closed my eyes, the word mistake echoing in my ears. Was that all it had been? A momentary lapse in judgment that had created a life now hanging in the balance. Let me think, I said finally. I'll figure something out. I spent the next 3 days in a fog of anxiety, researching kidney donation protocols, genetic testing procedures, and possible cover stories. None seemed viable without revealing the truth. On the 4th day, I came home to find Sarah sitting at the kitchen table, a strange expression on her face. Oliver was at my mother's house for the afternoon. I got a call from Boston Children's Hospital today, she said without preamble. About Elena. My heart stopped. Is she okay? No, she's not. Sarah's voice was eerily calm. She needs a kidney transplant. They were calling to see if Oliver might be a match, as her half-brother. The world tilted beneath me. I gripped the back of a chair to steady myself. Sarah, don't. She held up her hand. I already spoke with Mia. She told me everything. I sank into the chair across from her, unable to form words. 3 years, Sarah continued, her calm demeanor belied by the tremor in her hands. 3 years of lies. Both of you. I never meant to hurt you, I whispered, the words pathetically inadequate. But you did. You both did. Finally, her composure cracked, tears spilling down her cheeks. How could you, Daniel? How could you do that with my best friend? There was no defense, no explanation that could possibly justify what I'd done. I sat in silence, accepting her anger, her pain, knowing I deserved every bit of it. I'm having Oliver tested, she said finally, wiping her tears. Not for you. Not for Mia. For Elena. She's innocent in all this. Relief mingled with shame. Thank you. Sarah stood, gathering her composure around her like armor. Don't thank me. This doesn't mean I forgive you. Either of you. As she walked out of the room, I called after her, what happens now? To us. She paused in the doorway, not turning around. I don't know, Daniel. I honestly don't know. Oliver was a match. The operation was scheduled for the following month, with Sarah insisting on accompanying our son to Boston herself. I was permitted to come along, though my role was peripheral at best. In the sterile waiting room of Boston Children's Hospital, Mia and I sat on opposite sides of the room, while Sarah paced between us, a physical manifestation of the gulf between what had been and what now was. Why? Sarah asked suddenly, stopping in front of me. After all these years, that's the one thing I still don't understand. Why did you agree to it? I looked up at my wife, the woman I'd betrayed in the most fundamental way possible, and realized I owed her the complete truth. Because I was scared, I admitted. We've been trying for so long, and you were slipping away from me. When Mia asked, part of me thought, if I couldn't give you a child, at least I could help someone else. So, it was about you feeling inadequate. Sarah's voice was sharp. Partly, I acknowledged, and partly because I didn't want to lose you to disappointment. I thought if I did this one thing for Mia, somehow it would balance the scales. Make up for failing you. Sarah shook her head, a sad smile on her lips. You never failed me, Daniel. We were in it together. The only failure was in not trusting that. She crossed the room to Mia, who looked up with red-rimmed eyes. And you, Sarah said, her voice softer but no less firm. You are my best friend. My sister in everything but blood. I'm so sorry, Sarah, Mia whispered. I was desperate and selfish. Yes, you were. Sarah sat down beside her. But Elena isn't, and neither is Oliver. The surgery was successful. Elena's body accepted Oliver's kidney, a perfect match as the doctors had predicted. During the recovery period, Sarah spent hours at Elena's bedside, reading stories and helping Mia navigate the complex post-transplant care. I watched from a distance, permitted brief visits with both children, but largely relegated to the periphery of their care. It was a position I accepted as part of my penance. On the day before we were scheduled to return home, Sarah found me in the hospital cafeteria, staring into a cup of cooling coffee. I've been thinking, she said, sliding into the seat across from me, about forgiveness. I looked up, afraid of hope. I'm not there yet, she continued. Maybe I never will be completely. But Oliver and Elena are siblings. They're connected now in ways that go beyond genetics. I won't make them pay for our mistakes. What does that mean? I asked cautiously. It means we need to find a way forward. All of us. Sarah sighed deeply. Not for us. For them. In that moment, I understood that whatever path lay ahead, it would be one of Sarah's choosing. She had taken control of the narrative we'd all been living in, reshaping it into something that could accommodate the truth while protecting the innocent. We returned home with a new reality to navigate. Sarah and I entered counseling, spending hours unpacking the layers of betrayal and the complex emotions that had led to it. Mia and Elena remained in Boston, but with a new openness about the connection between our families. When Oliver was old enough to understand, we told him a simplified version of the truth, that Elena was his half-sister, that families sometimes take unexpected shapes, that love can be complicated but no less real for its complexity. Sarah and I rebuilt our marriage slowly, piece by piece. Some days were harder than others. There were nights she couldn't bear my touch, mornings when the sight of me brought back the full weight of my betrayal. But there were also moments of genuine connection, of shared purpose in raising our son, of facing the consequences of our choices together. As for Mia, she and Sarah forged a new kind of friendship, more cautious, more bounded, but rooted in the undeniable bond between our children. The secrets that had nearly destroyed us became a shared history we carried together, a cautionary tale about the price of desperation and the unexpected resilience of love. Looking back now, years later, I recognize that what I once viewed as a momentary lapse in judgment was actually the culmination of 1,000 small choices. Moments when I chose silence over honesty, fear over trust. The weight of those choices will always be with me, a burden I've learned to carry as penance for the pain I caused. But I've also learned that even the most grievous mistakes can sometimes lead to unexpected grace. Oliver and Elena, now teenagers, share a bond that transcends the complicated circumstances of their connection. In their easy affection for each other, their fierce protectiveness, I see the possibility of redemption, not through forgetting the past, but through building something meaningful from its ashes. Sarah was right all those years ago. Family is something you create, not something that happens to you. Sometimes that creation comes from joy, sometimes from pain, sometimes from the messy, complicated space in between. But in the end, it's the truth that matters. Not the comfortable lies we tell ourselves, but the difficult truths we choose to face together.